All right.
Um,
Hi, everybody. Joe, would you like to start with your introduction, and I'll go into my presentation?
Sure. Hi, guys. My name is Joe Gibison. This is my 13th year as an art teacher with Baltimore County Public Schools in Maryland. This is my second year with a program for Baltimore County called the Virtual Learning Program. And me and Jennifer work with elementary age students, basically right now, first through fifth grade. And we just love Wixie. Wixie is an amazing tool that's very equitable. They all have access to it. So when the students are home or maybe at a relative's house and they don't have access to their supplies for art, we can always kind of use Wixie and get creative. So we love Wixie.
And I'm Jennifer Mesaros. This is my 31st year teaching. It's the last two in the virtual learning program. And yeah, I also really love Wixie. I mean, whenever we do the lessons, the saturation of colors is just so great, and all the patterns they can use, and just learning how to use all the tools has been really fun for me and also for all the kids. So that's tonight I'm going to share two projects that I did, and then Joe's going to share his. So the two I'm going to share are the still lifes and class quilt. These are both from the same class. They're both fourth grade projects. I do them with fifth grade too, but I just decided to share this with the fourth grade. So I'll go ahead and start, and I'll put the link for Wixie in the chat box in case anybody wants to use it to work along with me. So I'm going to show like a slide, and then I'll do like one step of the project so you can see what it looks like. Okay, so for the still life, I always start with an inspiration artist. The inspiration artist for this assignment was Giorgio Morandi. He's an Italian painter. And we looked at the symmetry of the objects and also the simplicity of the objects. And that, I think, really appealed to the kids, how simple they were. And so we started off with making black outlines of 5 still life objects in Wixie. And then I put in each slide the tools that we used. So I set the paintbrush at 5, and we used the horizontal mirror symmetry tool. And so I put one example of mine and one student example here. So to do this, what I did, I'm just going to draw one object since it's, just in the interest of time. So I'll go ahead and grab my paintbrush. And Joe and I both make videos too of our screens whenever we're doing this so that the kids can go back and look at it after, after we present it or if they're absent. There we go. Okay, so that's step 1. I'm actually going to switch these around. There we go. So in step 2, I show them how to select the objects and paste them to a new page. And then once all the objects are organized on the page, I do have them do 2 still life sketches, and they can select them using either the rectangle tool or the lasso tool. The eraser tool comes in handy if things are overlapping. I use the line tool for the table, and then convert the selection to a sticker tool, and the glue bottle tool to glue everything down. So for this one, I'm just going to go to page 1. I'm going to select it and then Control C, and then go to page 2 and do Control V. And then once it's there, I glue it down. So I click this once, click it twice, and now it's glued there. And you couldn't see that because I didn't share. I can do it one more time. There we go. Did you give me the thumbs up, Joe? I missed it.
I tried, yeah.
Okay, take 2. Select it. And then Control C, or now page 2, Control V, and then glue it down. Okay. All right, next step. They fill it in with a paint bucket tool. And oh, actually, I added the table line too. So I'll go back and add the table line. And I use that with the line tool. And then I always tell them um, a lot of times the line tool doesn't go right to the edge. And so if they try to use the paint bucket tool, it will fill in the whole thing. So I always tell them to put like a little extra dot of like the paint on. It only seems to happen on the right side. So I tell them to put a little bit of paint there just to close that up. And then they color it in. So I'm using the paint bucket. I tell them to put like in the background, they can put a filter or a fill tool using like a light source. So it makes it look like the light's coming from one direction. Okay, so there's my very simple composition. And then we do shading and smudging. So prior to this lesson, I did do a unit on shading with them on paper. So they're familiar with shading, so they understand that the light source comes from one side and that the shading all goes on the same side and how to put shadows underneath of it. And we use the marker tool. So what I have them do is I select the yellow and then go to the arrow. So there's a range of values. Click on one of the darkest ones and then go to the marker brush because that gives it kind of a, you can see through it somewhat. And then that helps to, it makes it look more realistic. So I'm going to go up pretty far. And then this is a great tool to see, like when I put this here, I can see if that's about the right amount of shading that I want. I forgot to take this off. There we go. So I add the shading here, and then to really make it look realistic, I have them use the smudge tool, and just have to be careful with that, that it doesn't smear the black outline, which it just did, but there we go. So they smudge it, and then they add the shadow. So to do the shadow, I'm just going to use blue and get a darker value of it. Add a shadow underneath, and then smudge that also. And I just have them go around the edge. And then there are some of their examples. So any questions about that project?
That looks great, Jennifer.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks, Heidi. Thank you. Yeah, these are all 4th grade. They're very talented. All right, so the next one isn't very long. It's the same class, like I said, but I wanted to do a group project with them. So I wanted them to come up with their own theme for a quilt. So we looked at Michael Cummings and Faith Ringgold as our inspiration artists, and it was during African American History Month, so I wanted to choose African American artist for that. And so we did a jam board to come up with a theme. Hi, Denise.
Hi, Denise.
And they put their little post-its on to say what they wanted the theme of the quilt to be. And the next part, they voted on it. And what they came up with was landscapes. So I didn't do a demo for this part because they looked up clip art images of landscapes. I encouraged them, with a quilt, because it's mostly made out of fabric, that they would choose some patterns in places and add that to their quilt piece. And then after they did their landscapes, I put them together on a PowerPoint slide, and I let them choose, like, as a group, what they voted on what color they thought would look the best in the background, and that's their finished quilt. And that's it. So, any questions about that one?
Love the quilt idea.
Thanks, Joe. All right, thank you.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
thank you, Jennifer. And I
Yeah,
love this taking
you're
us through that
welcome.
step-by-step process too. Amazing. Very
Uh,
creative stuff.
Thank you. All right.
All
Well,
right.
Joe, I'm gonna give it over to you, so I'm gonna stop sharing.
All right, guys.
Thanks, Cheryl. Thanks,
Yeah,
Danielle.
put up my little slide here. And then I am also, just in case anybody wants to work alongside me, I am going to put in the chat the link for Wixie as well. Always throwing the link in the chat. I feel like the best way to learn is by doing. So if you want to just work alongside with me, feel free. So again, my name is Joe Gibison. This is my 13th year with Baltimore County Schools. I just picked 2 lessons to share with you guys tonight that my students really enjoyed. Some of them made some of these designs on their own. When we're looking here at the slide, the first one is these flower patterns that are inspired by this artist, Takashi Murakami. Takashi Murakami's work looks like this. He is a Japanese pop artist. He creates these kind of beautiful floral patterns, and he's really kind of connected to pop culture. So the students really loved getting to learn about him and designing some work that's very similar to his. And then the second one that I'll be focusing on is these abstract symmetrical faces. There wasn't really any particular artist that I had in mind when I designed this lesson, but there was some tools in Wixie that I had in mind that I thought were fun for the students to use. And so I'm going to go in there and show you exactly how we went about creating both of these things, both of these lessons. So I'm going to go into Wixie here and just kind of show you one of my designs that we created with this kind of Murakami inspiration in mind. And the way that we went about this is normally when I get started with a lesson with any of my classes, sometimes I'll do through templates, I'll assign them, or I'll create a lesson and give some directions and assign them as well. Sometimes I'll just have them start off with a new project up at the top. And for this particular one, I had them pick landscape. And somebody have a question? And so then when we started, I also try to get them in the habit of titling their work. So it could be just whatever the lesson number might be, or also it could be the name of the artist that is the inspiration. So depending on what they want to go with, we can title the work. Now, as far as designing this, a couple of the tools that we used were first, we start off with the shape tools. And we go in here, and when you pick the shape tool, I always pick a black to kind of start with the outline. And then we just really have to focus on the width of the line, because if the line is a little bit too wide, it might not be for the desired look that you're going for. We always talk about the undo tool, making sure that you can go backwards and forwards depending on what you're trying to create. So I think a good width for this is somewhere around like a 10. I always tell them in a range, maybe, 7 to 10 or, whatever it might be. And then we first start off by just kind of drawing the circle. And then once we have the circle, the next thing I do is we go over to the paintbrush tool. And again, in black, we'll do some outlines here. Here, I'll probably thin it down just a little bit more to like a 6 or a 7. And then I start off with the flower petals. So we go with just one flower petal up top, one flower petal down below. And I talk about the importance of trying to connect the lines, because eventually we'll be using the paint bucket tool to fill these in with colors. So this is what they need to zoom in and just make sure that the lines are connected, just to kind of get it so that it's easy once it's time to turn this into a sticker and move it around. So then we'll go over to the side, do a petal over here on the side, zoom in, make sure it's connected. And then you put about 2 petals in between each one. And it doesn't need to be exact. And then you just build out this symmetrical design. Some of the vocabulary that we talk about in this lesson is just pattern, pop art, balance, design. And then when it's time to make the face, we also talk about mood. Depending on what type of mood you're trying to create, you can draw the face in the flower, kind of like an emoji style face, where you can have some different moods. The kind of the Murakami mood is generally a pretty fun one. So we'll start off by drawing the eyes. And then I talk about just kind of getting a highlight in there by leaving a little white dot. But then after you draw the little white dot, if you want to get it a lot sharper, then you can just go in and take the eraser tool and just kind of dot in the size that you want it to be, so you can get the highlight. Well, that's a little bit too big. You can get the highlight to be just right. That looks pretty good. And then we go back, and then you also, for Murakami style, you kind of start with like a frowny face almost, but then you turn it into a big cheesy smile face. And once you have it and it's looking pretty good, you can go in, and this is a time that we actually go and select around it with the selection tool. And then once you do that, you're able to, let me get it all the way around it. You're able to turn it into a sticker, and then you can freely kind of move it around. At this point in time, you can resize it, and then you can also duplicate it a bunch of times, and then you can start to create your pattern design. Now we also start to talk about how you can glue it down, and then once you have it glued down, you can start to paint bucket fill it in. And I often start with just kind of like a pattern that goes around it. I can see that it's not fully connected right there, so if I need to, I can zoom in and correct that. Looks like I'm missing a few lines right here. And right here. So once you get in there and it's looking pretty good, looks like it's going to work for you, you can see if you can go around and create a pattern with the paint bucket. This one, I think we'll just kind of switch it around here, put some yellows. Oh, I'm missing down at the line down here. Let it zoom all the way in. Let me see if I can do it on a different one. Looks like I ran out a little bit of room at the bottom. And that's what's so important about this, is that you got to make sure that you have it so that everything's closed in when you use the paint bucket tool, or else it's going to have a tough time when it comes to paint bucketing it in. Maybe I'll skip that one. And then once you have some that you can then go and change it back into a sticker. Change this into a sticker. And then you can duplicate this a bunch of times. And if I want to, what I can do right now is I can get rid of some of this stuff. And I'll just create my work of art from the one that I was able to successfully work on. Oops. And I'll just start moving around and build my pattern with this design. You can resize them so that they're not all the exact same sizing. And then you can keep duplicating them and get it to be a really kind of interesting, fun pattern that fills up the space nicely. So I've got that one that I wasn't able to get. I'll just really fill it in so that I can get it to be kind of very creative and fun. Now, also what we talk about with this particular one is when you have it and you want to add a new pattern into it, you can try to glue some of these down, and then you can try to maybe paint bucket fill them in with different designs as far as like different fills. Now, sometimes when you glue them down, they move around, but if you get it to glue down and you can see it, then you can paint bucket in with a different kind of fill. So maybe you'll do like a checkered fill and kind of a different color, and see if you can kind of put in some different designs and patterns like that. But the most important thing is when you select it and you glue it down, then you got to be able to find it, and then you can paint bucket it in and start to have a little bit of fun like that. So that's the Murakami patterns, and that's inspired by just the idea of, pop art, design, it's a lot of pattern, of course, as well. And this is one that the students really, really enjoyed. They had a lot of fun with. They love turning their drawings into stickers. And then being able to move them around and manipulate them from there. And then there's always some challenges along the way, and we talk about those, and we just work on ways that we can kind of overcome it and get it to still be a complete work of art. The next one that I was working on with the class, before I move into that, does anybody have any questions about possibly, any questions about that I could possibly answer about that first project? And I'm looking in the chat here because I'm kind of bouncing back and forth.
So bright and colorful.
Cool. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Thank
Nice.
you. Yeah, I kind of ran out of room there at the bottom, so I didn't close in that bottom pedal. Caused me some issues, but nothing we weren't able to fix. Now, when we go into our next lesson, the focus of that lesson is the symmetrical abstract faces. And what I really love about this lesson is it allows students to use the measuring tool. So we had lots of good ones for this symmetrical face lesson. And, I find that students, especially elementary school students, some of them have never used a ruler. And so, even working virtually with my classes, it's still a great experience for them to be able to talk about measuring and bring in some math components to the lesson. So that's something that we do with this particular lesson. And then we talk about symmetry and the idea of symmetry and how that connects to some mathematical concepts as well. So for this one, again, I'll assign it. But for you guys, I'm going to start off just with a new project here, and I pick portrait because we're drawing a face, and we talk about the idea of the different orientations, landscape versus portrait, and what that kind of means, and how you'd see a landscape painting or how you'd see a portrait painting or a work of art. Then of course I go in, I try to always get them to get in the habit of titling their work. It'd be as simple as titling it a portrait or a symmetrical portrait. Some of the big vocabulary in this particular lesson is definitely symmetry, line, balance. And we also talk about mood. We talk about mood with the Murakami designs as well, just based off of like the colors that you choose or the facial expressions that you decide to create. For this one, when we get into it, I have them start off by using a measuring tool. So we'll go with the inches, and you can move the ruler around. And then we kind of just start off by having the ruler on the side, going and grabbing the paintbrush and putting a little dot, just be anywhere towards where the end of the ruler is. Then we'll move the ruler over. So we know that's 6 inches. Move the ruler over, or maybe kind of just end it where you can kind of see that it's about 8 inches wide, the width of paper. So we'll go back over here to the side, place the ruler down, and then we talk about, half of 8 being 4. So I talk about going back and adding a couple dots around the 4. Doesn't need to be exact, but you just try to get an idea of where the center of the page is. All right, once we have that, we talk about going back to the pointer tool and dropping the ruler by just clicking on where it's highlighted. Then we go into our shape tool. And then with the shape tool, we go to the line. I always like to make it dashed for some reason. Go to the dashed option, grab the width, knock it all the way down, and then just drag a line, any color, I say, doesn't matter, and just try to put our line of symmetry running through the center of the page. Now, once we have the relative line of symmetry, kind of like, in the center area, then we're going to go to the paintbrush tool. I ask them to grab the black. 9 is a pretty good size. The default is often 9. That works pretty well. I drag it down just a little bit to like 7. And then here we are going to use the symmetry tool, or what is known as the mirror horizontally tool. And so we grab that. And then we talk about drawing a symmetrical face, having, and how faces show symmetry with the 2 eyes through the bridge of the nose, through the center of the lips and the chin. But we work either left or right, depending on what they're more comfortable with, but you start right on the line of symmetry. Now, we've already worked on a lesson about self-portraits and drawing faces previous to this, so we're kind of building off some prior understanding. But you start right in the center, and then you go off to the side, and then we talk about them drawing the eye. And we also let it be abstract, let it have a lot of creative freedom. Some students are going to do this in all like one continuous line. So we practice what like a continuous line drawing could look like, where you never lift it off the page as you're drawing. And right now I'm doing a continuous line one. Talk about filling in the cheek area, the chin, up to the head, putting some designs up there, and running the line through a couple times to get it to look whatever the desired look might be. And I say try it a couple times. If it doesn't work out the first time, undo it and see if you can try it again. If you like the first one, we talk about adding a page off to the side. With a page off to the side, just doing a couple within the project so that you can pick one that you really like. There's really no wrong way of going about this. The focus was just the 3 facial features of eyes, nose, and mouth. And then whatever design they get is what they end up getting. And then once we're in here, this is when we'll start to use the paint bucket tool and just try to do whatever we do on the left-hand side to balance off on the right-hand side with the paint bucket tool. So if this eye is blue, that eye is blue. If you do a little bit outside the eye yellow, whoop, can't click it right on the line. And it works really well because when you do it in one continuous line, something that I was struggling with a little bit with that Murakami flower is they tend to be all enclosed shapes. So then the paint bucket tool works really well with this lesson. And it can also get into different types of fills and just kind of have some fun as they are coloring in their face with different designs, different patterns, different colors, and different fills. And we just build out from here. Now, to go back kind of from Wixie and just kind of look at some of the examples that I was sharing with you at the beginning, we also talked about with the flower patterns, just kind of theme and mood. So I thought it was a fun choice that one of my students picked the font to look like a video game, because we talked a little bit about the inspiration of pop art and Takashi Murakami being inspired by video games. And then when it comes to the symmetrical face, this particular one just has a beautiful, unique look to it. And we started to talk a little bit about the idea of color and mood. And when we go into kind of color and mood, we also talked about how, blue can represent sadness, or green can represent, maybe possibly not feeling well, and red could represent maybe anger. And then we also talk about how lines and shapes and colors can create mood and facial expressions. And so I got a variety of everything. I got some that were very joyous. I got some that were a little bit more serious, some that were kind of angry or scary, and some that were sad. And we just talked about what types of colors, what types of lines and shapes were able to kind of create those moods in art. And that's it. So thank you guys for listening and watching me. Had a little trouble there, but we got through it. Do you guys have any questions for what I just went over?
So cool.